Hello and welcome to the first Wisden Headingley Ashes Daily podcast. I'm Yas Rana and with me this evening is Ben Gardner, Englander 68 for 3 in response to Australia's 263. Ben, when I woke up this morning, I wasn't expecting a Mitch Marsh 100, an astonishing innings really. Wickets fell regularly throughout the day with the exception of that afternoon session where he individually scored 100 runs in a session, and he was noticeably the most comfortable against Mark Wood's pace. Just a brilliant innings.
Yeah, it's just a mad innings and a mad day. I mean, so if you take the first session and the last session and one ball, Australia were 114 all out, and then between that I think it was 149 for naught and 114 of those were Mitch Marsh's. And you were slightly late getting to the ground, so you text me sort of on your way and be like, what the hell, why is Mitch Marsh playing? And it says so Cam Green's got a hamstring injury, that's all it is. But this is, I mean, he absolutely seized his chance as he often does against England. It's kind of weird because I was looking back, I was remembering that his last test was, I remembered his last test at the Oval, but I didn't remember it was his last test, and he took five for, and I was like, why did he not play again? And he broke his hand punching a wall, and then Head comes in and Green comes in. So there's kind of a sense that we don't actually know how good Mitch Marsh might be right now.
I think also he's come on so much as a white ball player in the last few years.
Exactly.
I mean, he's not played a single test match in that, so he was, I guess, he was a sort of a bits and pieces all-rounder in white ball cricket, and then he was elevated to the top of the order and became one of Australia's most important players. He was player of the match in the 2021 T20 World Cup final. So in that sense, he's a completely changed player since we last saw him in Test cricket, and to be honest, he was an unknown coming into this game.
Yeah, but then also the things that he did well were, for the most part, the things we know Mitch Marsh can do really well, because we'll come to Mark Wood, but the key thing he did really in that middle session was he took down Mark Wood. He hit him for, I think he put him for 6 and hit him for 2/4 the next over, and basically it's not that they had to yank Wood from the attack, but they knew how precious Wood overs were, so let's not have them against the guy who's basically looking pretty comfortable against him, and then he looked pretty comfortable against everyone, and that was a pretty key moment too, that he was able to do that, and he is, and always has been, a very good player of fast bowling, which not everyone is, even some of the more technically proficient players. That is a different kind of technical and temperamental examination, and one that he has actually kind of always been good at that, but he's also added some other stuff because his wicket was doing a fair bit in other ways as well. I mean, you couldn't really question Ben Stokes' decision to bowl first, even though he did look down and not up, as you're not supposed to do at Headingley. But yeah, it's freakish, and then obviously he takes a wicket at the end of the day as well to maybe just edge Australia's nose in front.
Oh, I think it's Australia's day with that third wicket for sure. And worth saying about the pitch as well, by far the quickest one we've seen this series. And actually, when Marsh was really hitting its stride, it almost felt like you were watching a passenger play from a down under Ashes series on a quick pitch. England's pace bowlers, even the quick ones, not really causing a huge amount of trouble for the Australian batters. It really is just a bizarre career, right? So he's got that man of the match in a World Cup final. He's potentially scored 100 in a game that seals Australia's first Ashes win in 22 years. He averages like 50 odd against England with the bat and basically 20 against everyone else.
But 3 Ashes hundreds is a lot of Ashes hundreds. I was going through the list of people who have 3, and it's David Warner, Adam Gilchrist, Ian Botham, legends of the game, and Mitch Marsh has gotten one bit of his Ashes record to match with them.
Ben, the other star today was Mark Wood, utterly brilliant. 534, his first 5 for on home soil. We get to his effect on the game itself, but it was pure theatre watching him charging in, bowling 95-mile-per-hour rockets.
Yeah, and it was right from that very, very first ball, which was, because obviously, whenever a bowler comes back, and Mark Wood's come back from injuries a few times, and generally, at least in recent years, has been as quick when he's come back. But there's still that slight hesitation whenever anyone comes back, are they going to take an over or two to get back into it? That very first ball was 91 miles an hour, and everyone just kind of sits up and is like, oh, okay, the Ashes just feels a little bit different right now. Then the next ball's 93 miles an hour. The next one's 95 miles an hour, and you're wondering, is he
going to get to 103 at the end of the over?
Yeah, exactly. And even the crowd, it wasn't like there are some times when you're watching like a great spell of bowling when the crowd is like fully like absorbed in one way and part of it, and is like becoming sort of part of what's cheering the whole thing along. That like say when Broad's doing one of those spells and he's kind of actively engaged in the crowd and is clapping them in. That wasn't really happening here. Occasionally it would, maybe after Wood beat the bat, or they just kind of remembered that they could clap him in. But actually, quite a lot of the time, they were basically just kind of silent watching to see what happened because you just didn't want to miss it. And then as soon as the ball was bowled, it felt like everyone was just looking up at the scoreboard, and you almost had the cheers that were bigger for that than for anyone playing a miss at some point. 96.5 miles per hour, the quickers, absolutely mad.
Yeah, I mean, he genuinely reminded me of peak Shoaib Akhtar today, where when you're bowling that quickly, and 97 miles per hour is that ball he bowled was quicker than any ball that Jofra Archer bowled in that famous Lord spell against Steve Smith. And when you're bowling that quickly, even against some of the best players in the world, just by bowling at the stumps can be enough. And that wicket of Khawaja in particular, I know it did a little bit through the air as well at 95 miles per hour, I think it was. That could have been from like a Shoaib Akhtar 2002 compilation. And that is genuinely Mark Wood's pace bracket when he's at his very, very best.
Yeah, and it's funny as well because when you look at the spell, it was the first 3.4 overs, there were no runs scored off the bat. There was one ridiculous bouncer that goes not just over the bat's head but over Bairstow's head, one bounce into the boundary hoardings and breaks the boundary hoardings, and that was at like 93 miles an hour, so he was a lot quicker than that at some points. But it also, in a weird way, it wasn't like there was pressure building, because you do get the sense that, you know, if you can just get through a guy like that, he's not going to bowl for too long. It's just what passed us now, by the way. If you can get through a spell like that, he's not going to go on for too long, so you're going to get other chances, and also you might get a chance to score at him against him at some point. It's more just that if there's enough balls that are that quick at the stumps, basically no one is going to be good enough to keep them out regularly. And that's like you say, that was kind of prime Shoaib, what he was like, and it's what Mark Wood was like today. And then it was at the end that he got his reward. And in England, have, as much as that first spell was the moment for me, that was the thing that was like that's what I'll remember. But that last spell was the deserved reward, and England have not been that good at bowling out the tail off.
It could be utterly pivotal. That was a proper collapse at the end of that Australia innings. I think just on Wood, I think people misremember and his career a little bit. So since he lengthened his run up in 2019, the start of 2019, he's taken 67 test wickets at 24, and he hasn't got on the park that much. I don't think people realise just the difference between short run up and long run up for Wood. This is just his fifth home test since he lengthened his run up, and we've very rarely got to see him actually bowl like this. He's done the job for England, obviously, in Pakistan. He did really, really well. He did well in Australia. He took a sixth in his last Ashes innings in Hobart in 21-22. Moving on to some less good stuff from England today. Got to talk about the missed chances. They dropped 4 catches today, and in comparison to Australia took 3 smartly held chances in the cordon. The
kind of catches that England dropped, basically.
Exactly, yeah. And then England dropped Head early, Smith early, Marsh really early, and Carey too. The Marsh one was a dolly, really, and potentially cost England in the region of 100 or so runs. And that genuinely, for all the talk about the contrast in styles, that has actually been one of the biggest differences between the two sides in the series. Australia win by 2 wickets at Edgbaston. England missed 5 or 6 chances at Edgbaston, and that can be the difference. And it, you know, we're saying that Australia are probably slightly ahead in the game now. That's the difference between England and Australia being ahead of the game at this point.
Yeah, and it's weird as well, because it's one of those things where with any issue a side has, you like to sort of like extrapolate and try and find
you want a reason for why a team is bad.
Exactly, but it's hard to explain because England haven't always been a bad catching team, and maybe I reckon what the line will become, if this is the thing, that if England lose this game and then the Ashes with it, will again be about the preparation, and could they have, you know, spent more time catching loads of balls rather than, you know, hitting them at St Andrews or whatever. But it also just might not be that. It might just be that guys are a bit out of form. That it's just one of those things. In Australia, also they've caught really well as well, which has kind of put England's struggles.
Yeah. Worth saying, Australia have been way above average in the field. It's not that England have been just a little bit below par and Australia have been par. It has been England have been below par and Australia have been well above it.
Yeah, but I guess the other thing as well is the effect it has on the bowlers. I mean, England still did well to bowl Australia out for 260, but it was kind of, until a wicket came, there was a certain, in that middle session, there was a certain amount of deflation, basically, that actually came on quite quickly. And obviously drop catches just hurt so much, because you imagine as a bowler, from one hand, you'd look at it and think like, okay, we are making chances. From other think like, well, actually, it's now looking a bit flatter. I'm not sure where a chance is coming from. And even if we create one, who says it's going to be taken? Like it must be deflating. And you could sense that a little bit in that middle session, even though England did obviously blow away the tail when they got the breakthrough. There was that little bit that kind of shows the other effect of drop catches, I think.
I know there are people screaming, listening to this, just screaming Ben Folkes. That's one controllable I guess, that England have decided not to pursue.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was interesting that in the team selection for this test, with Pope missing out on injury, they were flexible enough to move Harry Brook up the order. They were flexible with their batting order in a way that's accommodated an extra bowler. I wonder if Stokes regains full fitness with the ball later in the series. They might use that as an opportunity to squeeze Ben Foakes back inside, because he had a better test at Lords, but he missed 4 opportunities at Edgbaston. He's missed 2 here.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was very difficult, and was worth saying, but that's still probably 4 pretty gettable chances in 3 test matches. And when you compare that to the other guy, that again is a really noticeable difference between the 2 teams.
Yeah, and I wonder as well for this test if it was just about the gap between them, if they'd had a few more days to think about it, basically, and a bit of a gap to get whoever they called up into the squad a bit more, whether they might have called up a replacement. But and Ben Foakes would have run here if it means he gets to play in an Ashes Test match. But equally, that's, to some extent, if it's 2 days out, you look around who you've got, and then you make the best with what you have. But yeah, I'd hope he comes back into the thinking at least for the next test, because also it's just inconsistent, which is what England haven't been. They've been almost too consistent with their selection and with their messaging since Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum took over. But this is an inconsistency, that Foakes was in the best team up until a few games ago. And then the only reason why he's not in the team is because they needed to fit all these guys in, and now they don't need to fit all the guys in, and yet somehow he's still not in the best team. And Stokes wasn't always bowling in those tests when there was a place for Foakes. I know that there's a question then over the spinner, because England had a spinner who gets through loads of overs, so that there are complications. It's not as simple as there's a batter missing out, so Foakes is the next person in. That it's slightly more complicated than that, but also maybe it doesn't need to be that much more complicated than that.
Well, Johnny Bairstow got a potentially huge day with the bat coming up tomorrow. Ben, cheers for your time. That's everything for today. We'll be back tomorrow evening.